And in June, we obliterated Iran's nuclear capacity in Operation Midnight Hammer. You saw that. People have been waiting for 22 years to do that, and we were right at the end. They were about a month away from nuclear weapons. And by the way, there's another beautiful armada floating beautifully toward Iran right now. So we'll see. I hope they make a deal. I hope they make a deal. They should have made a deal the first time they'd have a country.
The warning landed like a thunderclap, blunt and unmistakable, as the president declared that time was running out for Iran and that any failure to strike a nuclear deal would bring consequences far more devastating than anything seen before. In a moment that immediately rippled across global capitals, Donald Trump framed the situation not as a distant diplomatic dispute, but as a closing window, one where hesitation could invite overwhelming force. The message was clear: negotiate now, or face a military response that would eclipse all previous confrontations. That warning did not come through a formal press briefing or a carefully staged diplomatic channel. Instead, it arrived through a lengthy post on Truth Social, Trump's preferred platform for direct communication. In it, he described what he called a powerful U.S. armada moving toward Iran, urged Tehran to make a deal, and suggested that patience in Washington had all but expired. The language was characteristically dramatic, mixing urgency with threat, and it immediately reignited debate over whether the United States was on the brink of another major Middle Eastern conflict. Supporters argued the post was a calculated pressure tactic, while critics warned that such rhetoric risked escalation without guardrails. Behind the words, however, there is a very real military movement underway. The USS Abraham Lincoln Aircraft Carrier Strike Group has arrived in the Middle East, marking a significant increase in U.S. naval power in the region. Carrier strike groups are not symbolic gestures. They are among the most formidable tools in the American military arsenal. Their presence signals readiness, deterrence, and the capacity to project force across vast distances. For allies, the arrival of such a group can be reassuring. For adversaries, it is a warning that the United States is prepared to act if diplomacy fails. Some confusion followed Trump's use of the word armada, which conjures images of massive fleets stretching across the horizon. Military analyst Mikey Kaye offered clarification, explaining that the term refers to a carrier strike group centered on the USS Abraham Lincoln. This group includes guided missile cruisers, destroyers, and often submarines, all operating together as a tightly integrated unit. The layered defenses around a carrier are designed to protect it from air, surface, and underwater threats, making it one of the hardest targets in modern warfare. The loss or serious damage of such a vessel would be unthinkable, not only militarily but politically. The strategic importance of this carrier group cannot be overstated. Aircraft carriers serve as floating air bases, capable of launching strikes hundreds of miles inland without relying on foreign soil. They also symbolize American resolve. Any attack on a U.S. carrier would almost certainly trigger a massive response, potentially drawing multiple nations into a wider conflict. This is why carrier strike groups are so heavily protected and why their deployment is closely watched by adversaries and allies alike. Their presence alone alters calculations in Tehran, Tel Aviv, Riyadh, and beyond. Iran, for its part, is not blind to these movements. Reports indicate that Iranian forces are actively monitoring the carrier's position, including the deployment of long-range surveillance drones near the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway is one of the most strategically critical choke points in the world, through which a significant portion of global oil shipments pass. By tracking U.S. naval assets, Iran seeks to maintain situational awareness and demonstrate that it is not intimidated. At the same time, such close monitoring increases the risk of miscalculation, where a routine maneuver could be misread as a hostile act. Trump's warning also leaned heavily on references to past U.S. military actions. He cited what he called Operation Midnight Hammer, claiming that previous strikes had destroyed Iran's nuclear capability and asserting that Tehran had been close to developing a nuclear weapon. These claims are controversial and hotly debated among experts. While U.S. and Israeli actions have targeted Iranian facilities and personnel in the past, assessments of how close Iran is to a functioning nuclear weapon vary widely. Still, Trump's framing is deliberate. By portraying Iran as perpetually on the brink, he justifies the urgency and severity of his stance. Analysts examining the situation point out that the range of potential U.S. military options is broad. At one end are limited strikes aimed at disabling specific facilities, such as air defenses or missile systems. These could be designed to degrade Iran's capabilities without triggering full-scale war. At the other end are far more drastic actions, including targeting senior leadership or conducting sustained campaigns against nuclear infrastructure. The presence of a carrier strike group allows for rapid escalation if ordered, but it also provides flexibility, enabling calibrated responses depending on how events unfold. Yet the geopolitical tension does not exist in a vacuum. Alongside the nuclear standoff is a deepening human rights crisis inside Iran that adds moral weight to the confrontation. The discussion surrounding Trump's warning shifted sharply to reports of a brutal crackdown on protesters across the country. A U.S.-based human rights organization has confirmed more than 6,000 deaths linked to recent unrest, with investigations underway into reports that the true number could be significantly higher. These figures paint a grim picture of a state willing to use extreme violence to suppress dissent. Disturbing evidence continues to emerge from within Iran. Witnesses and journalists, including reporting from the BBC, describe security forces using live ammunition against crowds, raiding hospitals to arrest wounded protesters, and spreading fear through mass detentions. Civilians, including children, are among the dead. Families are often too frightened to speak publicly, fearing retaliation. In this context, the nuclear issue becomes intertwined with broader questions about legitimacy, governance, and the responsibility of the international community to respond to human suffering. For the Trump administration, this human rights record is frequently cited as part of the justification for a hardline approach. The argument is that a regime willing to kill its own people cannot be trusted with advanced nuclear technology. Critics counter that military threats often strengthen authoritarian governments by allowing them to rally nationalist sentiment and portray internal opposition as foreign-backed. This tension between moral outrage and strategic calculation has defined U.S.-Iran relations for decades, and it remains unresolved. Globally, reactions to Trump's warning have been mixed. Some allies quietly welcome a tougher stance, believing that pressure is the only language Tehran understands. Others fear that inflammatory rhetoric and visible military buildups increase the risk of accidental war. Markets have already shown signs of nervousness, with energy prices fluctuating amid concerns about potential disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz. Diplomatic channels remain active, but trust is thin, and every public statement is scrutinized for hidden signals. What makes this moment particularly volatile is the combination of explicit threats, visible military assets, and ongoing domestic turmoil within Iran. Each element amplifies the others. A misstep at sea, a misinterpreted drone flight, or a provocative statement could rapidly spiral into confrontation. At the same time, the presence of overwhelming U.S. force may deter Iran from taking aggressive action, buying space for negotiations to resume. Whether this strategy leads to a deal or disaster remains uncertain. As the situation evolves, the stakes could hardly be higher. Nuclear proliferation, regional stability, human rights, and global energy security are all bound up in this confrontation. Trump's warning has set the tone, but the outcome will depend on decisions made in Tehran, Washington, and beyond in the coming weeks. The world is watching closely, aware that history often turns on moments when rhetoric meets reality and restraint is tested by power. If you want to keep up with how this unfolding story develops, hit the subscribe button for more future uploads.